living by vow, silently sitting. 63 years. Plum blossoms begin to bloom. The jeweled mirror reflects truth as it is. Those were words written by Katagiri Roshi, and about 2 weeks later, he died of cancer. So this is what we would call a death poem, which traditionally in the Japanese culture it's written. I'm not sure about the Chinese culture, if it goes back that far, but that they write these poems kind of encapsulating their life just before passing. So I have written a number of those for practice, if you will. We even had a class one time on writing your own death poem. So I've written a number of them, and fortunately I've lived longer than the 2 weeks after putting the poem together. But here I am, living by vow, silently sitting, 73 years. So good morning, all you Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and Dharma treasures, and as I always say, unhesitatingly, you future corpses. And I always get a few smiles or grins out of this, but there's some real seriousness about it. Yesterday marked the first anniversary of the passing of my younger brother. So it was a very reflective day yesterday. As Dogen Zenji told us, your body is like a dewdrop on the morning grass. Your life is as brief as a flash of lightning, momentary and vain. It is lost in a moment. And so, as you've heard through some of our chants, that we are urged to practice diligently and eagerly, as though extinguishing a fire upon our heads, and contemplate impermanence and not squander our actions. And the evening verse that we do on Thursday nights, life and death are of supreme importance. Time swiftly passes by and opportunity is lost. Each of us should strive to awaken. Awaken. Take heed. Do not squander your life. So on a lighter note, thank you for the gift of your presence here on this beautiful summer morning here at the White Heron Sangha Meditation Center. And special thanks to those of you that are new or newer to us. Thank you for being here. And we have, as most of you know, a tradition when offering Dharma talks to acknowledge our Native American heritage, those that walked the lands that we walk on, they walked before us. And here it's the Northern Chumash, the Yakitutu Yaktahini people, and they still have a presence here, and it's growing. You go on their webpage, and the Northern Chumash Tribal Council, NCTC, their mission is to offer a foundation for the Chumash people of the San Luis Obispo and northern Santa Barbara County to bring our culture and heritage back to life, create dignity with the people, educate the public that the Chumash have always been here and we have not gone anywhere, and we will always be here, one continuum. We are the Chumash of over 20,000 years of habitation in San Luis Obispo County. So I'd like to acknowledge, pay my deep respect to the Northern Chumash people, their elders and ancestors, past, present, and future. So this morning, I wanted to do an inquiry or kind of a look at the nature of vows. We do a lot of vowing, as you know, in Zen. But I'll look at them first in a broader context, and then more specifically about how we use them in our Zen practice. So Always good to start with a definition, so Google, and there's Merriam-Webster, who says vow, the noun, a solemn promise or assertion, specifically one by which a person is bound to an act, service, or condition. And there is the verb vowed, vowing, vows, the transitive verb to promise solemnly, swear, to bind or consecrate by a vow. Most of us are, besides this, the Buddhist or Zen world, most of us are familiar with which vow in our lives? A marital vow, right. And how's that going for you? With what I think it's still something like 50% of marriages end in divorce. I've only got a 500 batting average, which is pretty good in baseball, but maybe not in marriage. But I will have to say I have never been happier in my current relationship. So Roshi Jan Chosenbei, in her book The Vow-Powered Life, a simple method for living with purpose, kind of expands upon this definition. And she writes, vows are the forces that weave together the fabric of your life and all life. Without vows, without purposeful action, life would cease to exist. Vows are not a mysterious, rare, or arcane activity. Once you learn about vows, you see and hear them everywhere. They pop up in books, in magazine articles, in movies, in our ordinary conversations. Headlines often call our attention to accomplishments that were set off by vows. Woman with one leg to conquer Everest. 6-year-old boy's dream brings water to 500,000 people. Muslim man saves Jewish shoppers from Islamic gunmen. Look around and vows are everywhere. They manifest as the book in your hands, the food in your refrigerator, the chair you're sitting on, the shelter over your head. Someone made each one of these things. And that someone had to have a vow, a goal, a clear intention in order to make it. Without vows, innovations and progress would not occur. And Roshi Chosen continues, there would have been no spearheads chipped from obsidian, no written languages, no solar panels, and there will be no future treatment for dementia. Her husband, Roshi Hoganbei, defines them as the heart's deepest aspiration, the heart's deepest aspiration. And she kind of also includes, maybe tongue-in-cheek, but says it's the reason you get out of bed in the morning. Roshi Chosenbei further suggests that vows simply channel energy. We determine the action. So that action can be a positive one or not so positive. And what comes to mind, and she shares this as well, is, for example, Adolf Hitler's vow to create a pure Aryan race, which, as we all know, resulted in the Holocaust. So we, as in Buddhists, are focusing more on the positive side of things. Vows that work to relieve, not decrease, the suffering of human beings and their companions on the earth. In her book, she goes into types of vows. Shodo Harada Roshi once told Roshi Chosen, life is the original vow. Life is the original vow. That's our vow to live, to get up every morning, to stay alive. nourish our bodies, go to work, take care of children. She speaks to inherited vows. So think about these as I'm, about in your own case, what might arise for you. My dad was a lawyer, so I became an attorney. My mom was a doctor, so I became a doctor. My family owned a business, and I moved into the business. My grandmother never drank alcohol. Lips that touch wine will never touch mine, so I don't drink. Further, there are inspired vows. All at once the cathedral was filled with Bach's fugue in D minor. It seemed to enter and possess my whole self, perhaps the closest I have ever come to experiencing ecstasy. It was a sort of call to action. I think I heard, in a form suitable for mortal ears, the voice of God. My life was taken over by a force far too strong to be resisted. The experience put me back on track. It forced me to rethink the meaning of life, my life on earth. That was Jane Goodall, the primatologist that most of us are familiar with. You can be inspired by a teacher, by a Gandhi, a Martin Luther King, a Dalai Lama, a Mother Teresa. Who have you been inspired by? There are also reactive and overreactive vows, which are interesting. So these are vows formed in response to something we want to pull away from or dislike. My dad was an alcoholic. I remain sober. I hate this politician and his political views, and I'm vowing to defeat him. So I was drawn to this subject as I was reflecting back on my own life and my own journey. My teacher, Roshi Gyoku Nakao, many years ago, took us through a process of working on vows, and most importantly, discovering or defining or forming our own personal life vows. It was a really, really powerful experience for me, and it stayed with me to this day. And I realized that they have been the driving and guiding force in my life. So that said, I am looking forward, after I dove into all of this, to doing a similar class, a workshop, if you will, a series of classes where we do this together in Sangha, where we look at our own life vows. Ordinary people are those who live being pulled by their karma. Bodhisattvas are those who live led by their vows. And that was Okumura Roshi, who actually wrote this book, Living by Vow, which I highly recommend. Great, great book. More on this in a little bit. And there's a psychology behind this idea of having vows. Research reveals that humans are goal-making beings, and vows, it turns out, are good for our health. Robert Emmons, who wrote The Psychology of Ultimate Concerns, writes, "The possession of and progression toward important life goals are intimately tied to our long-term well-being." So this well-being includes a sense of purpose, perhaps a feeling of satisfaction with your life, and a conviction that your life has meaning, no matter what the challenges are that are coming your way. Well-being also includes enhanced physical and mental emotional health and involvement in meaningful relationships. So it's interesting that the psychologists have this take. So I ask you, what are your vows at this point in time in your life? Do you have any, or are they just something that's kind of vague? You think you can define them? So are you living being pulled by your karma, or are you living by your vows? I think it's just really valuable to spend some time forming your vows. And if you don't have them, to develop them, work on them. And when you do, and if you do, revisit them often. For many of us, I suspect that perhaps we don't revisit them very often. Or sometimes, as in all these chants that we do, it just kind of, it's rote. Like you've memorized them and you've said them hundreds of times, and you don't really reflect on them anymore. And I know on my own personal vows, I just really don't visit them very often. I know that they're working on me. I know that. But Roshi Chosenbei, I was really inspired by her. She has a practice where every morning she goes over her vows. And I'm going to share some of those, and I reflected myself on some of these. So she said, for years I have begun each day with a silent recitation of my own vows and a request for assistance from the enlightened ancestors and all wise and holy beings. I have found that this practice keeps my energy focused and helps bring forward, often in mysterious ways, the resources I need to be effective. So she chants the Jizo mantra at least 3 times. Om ka ka kabisan mai sowaka, Om ka ka kabisan mai sowaka, Om ka ka kabisan mai sowaka. And then asks Jizo Bodhisattva to help her clarify and accomplish her deepest life vows. So her first vow, to become enlightened no matter how long this takes. I vow to never turn back from the path to enlightenment. And that's maybe a vow that most of us share. Goes deeper. My second vow, to help others to reveal their own enlightenment. And then she has may and lists all these names that she has at that moment, that may they become enlightened even before I do. And if you know Roshi Chosenbei, you probably won't be surprised. She's an amazing woman. She's a pediatrician. And the beginning to her book, Jizo Bodhisattva, is like gut-wrenching, because she tells a story of working with trauma patients, babies, pediatric trauma patients. She's amazing. So her third vow was to establish Great Vow Monastery, which she and Chosenbei did. And she says, establish it as a place of peace, beauty, spiritual renewal, and ever-deepening practice for many generations to come. And I had of course, the privilege to be up there last month. And Eduardo goes up there every year as well, teaching a class on the work, Byron Katie's work, the work. And I reflected I have somewhat a similar vow, and we're not building a monastery that I know of here, but it's just this group, starting this group 20 years ago, that there was a vow to have a sitting group in San Luis Obispo. Her fourth is to establish the Heart of Wisdom Zen Temple as a place of refuge in the city, a home, a hearth, and a bridge for all in need for many generations to come. So they have done that. That's their little city center in Portland. And I had an opportunity to visit that as well. The fifth is to raise at least several clear, strong students who will continue to give the gift of Dharma for many generations to come. And I relate to that. I think that's what we're doing here. We've got some very serious students that will hopefully carry this on way beyond me. That's the vow. She has a vow about writing 2 to 7 more books to support others in their spiritual life and practice. I don't have that. Don't have that in me, but I do have more haiku poems that that are just screaming to be written. And then the final, a vow to support my Dharma family and my biological family to help them reach their highest potentials for happiness and for benefiting others in their lifetimes. Isn't that beautiful? So that's biological family. Some of us are kind of segregated from our biological families, but to continue to vow to support them, to benefit for them. At the end, she says, all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, all wise and holy ones, all guardian spirits, all spirits of earth, fire, water, and air, all devas, I ask for your help in carrying out these vows. Although it may frighten me at times, I am willing to give up whatever must be given up in order to carry out these vows. So I think about my own personal vows that came out of this class so many years ago. One was to live simply. I was at a point, boy, I had 6-figure income, tons of retirement, and everything changed. But so did my view on attachment to these things. So this is a process. You know, it's ongoing. I still have a messy office at home that needs simplification. I have more books than probably I should. But that is something that after I took this vow or made this vow, it continues to work on me, really every day. Ryokan wrote, "My house is buried in the deepest recess of the forest." Doesn't that sound right? Each year, ivy vines grow longer than the year before. Undisturbed by the affairs of the world, I live at ease. Woodman's singing rarely reaching me through the trees. While the sun stays in the sky, I mend my torn clothes. And facing the moon, I read holy texts aloud to myself. Let me drop a word of advice for believers of my faith. To enjoy life's immensity, you do not need many things. Thank you, Ryokan. My second vow that I developed at that time was to serve others, however that manifested. Now, at the time, our 4 vows, we were talking about numberless beings I vow to save them. And then Bernie Glassman and Roshi Gyoku said, you know, that has too many connotations, like we're going to convert people, and we don't do that. So we switched it to serve. But I had already done this, my own personal vow about serving. More on that in a minute, because I kind of like the old way better, but be that as it may. So it has manifested like I couldn't believe. And remember, Roshi Chosenbei talks about these things, when you focus your energy, help comes forward, and sometimes in a very mysterious way. So doors have just opened up. For me, I've been working out with inmates at CMC for 20 years, but doing work with the homeless, that has opened up. Being a priest, it opened up the job as a hospice chaplain. So I was doing that for a number of years. And then the opportunity to carry on the Dharma has really opened up, being a priest and a teacher. And most recently, most of you know, I'm joining Mujin and involved in humanitarian work literally all over the world. Just tremendous manifestations. And they really did appear mysteriously. And I think I'm going to develop more vows. And the one that, I don't really think too much about or haven't thought too much about is the vow of a teacher, about carrying on the Dharma. And this, as I was reading Roshi Chosenbei's work and Okamura's Living by Vow, it really struck me. And this is, you have transmission in a ceremony called Denbo ceremony. And it's your final transmission before you become a teacher. Basically, it's your teacher saying, you can now teach the Dharma. And it's a secret ceremony, and you're in what we call the red room. So the room's usually a very small room, draped in red. It's an amazing feeling. And there's a high seat where your teacher sits. And the teacher in this ceremony is called the Demboshi. So in one part of the ceremony, you're laying out zagus. And the first time, she lays her zagu over the edge of your zagu. And you're doing vows. And at the end, the completion of the vows, you squeeze one another's hands. And then conversely, the student the successor will lay the tip of their zagu on top of the teacher's zagu. And again, squeezing hands. And the Demboshi says, life and death are of supreme importance. Time swiftly passes by. She says, now I give you the life of the Buddhas and ancestors. Do not ever let the seed of the Buddha be discontinued. And the successor replies, I won't, because of your loving compassion. And there's another moment in the ceremony where the Demboshi rubs the crown of the student's head 3 times and says, this has been handed down from the Tathagata generation after generation until myself, the 82nd in succession. Now I have you. It is just as when the world-honored one had Mahakashapa. All the Shobogenzo are transmitted now, and I entrust it to you. You should protect and maintain it well, and do not ever let it be discontinued. And you reply, I won't, because of your benevolent compassion. And when I reflected back on this, Ryokan again came up to me. He wrote, when I see the misery of those in this world, their sadness becomes mine. Oh, that my monk's robe were wide enough to gather up all the suffering people in this floating world. Nothing makes me more happy than the vow to save everyone. So how have these myriad opportunities manifested for you in your own life? All of us, it's safe to say, all of us in this room serve as parents, or serving as parents. Sometimes that's a positive thing, and sometimes it's a very challenging thing. Yeah? One of us is working to become a chaplain, and he works with the dying. We have teachers in our group, an economics professor who also teaches the work. We have one I wrote down that is serving the citizens of San Luis Obispo County in our judicial system, who is also a parent and a loving husband. We have those, a number of us, in our Sangha that are working the 12-step program and helping and serving others. And we all serve as Sangha members together. So we'll move out a little bit from the personal vows and speak to the Zen vows. And almost all of us, of course, are very familiar with the 4 Bodhisattva vows that we end every evening with, and after practically every Dharma event that we carry on. And ours are numberless beings, I vow to serve them. Inexhaustible delusions, I vow to end them. Boundless dharmas, I vow to practice them. Unsurpassable Buddha way, I vow to embody it. And we'll do that once more today at the end. But there are other versions, and I like some of the others. Sometimes I think they unfold better. And I can't remember which version this is, but it reads, however innumerable beings are, I vow to save them. However inexhaustible the passions are, I vow to extinguish them. However immeasurable the dharmas are, I vow to master them. However incomparable the Buddha truth is, I vow to attain it. So in Mahayana Buddhism, all of us can become bodhisattvas by arousing our bodhicitta, the bodhi mind, taking the precepts or these vows and practicing the 6 paramitas. And these precepts that we take, they are vows as well, right? The 3 refuges, Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. We have the pure precepts. This version reads, I vow to avoid all action that creates suffering. So we also say, cease from doing evil. I vow to do all action that creates true happiness. I vow to do good. I vow to act with others always in mind. And I think we say, I vow to do good for others. And then there's the 10 grave precepts. And we receive these precepts in our Zen journey at different times in life. And one is at the time of Jikido. Jukai, sorry. Jikido. And when we formally become Buddhists, and in our tradition we sew, as part of that process, we sew a rakusu that we wear. And we currently have a number in our Sangha that are sewing those. We also receive the precepts for Tokido, or priest ordination. We also receive them in the marriage ceremony that we do. And then, as Roshi Gyoku says, you're a captive audience when you're dying. And so you're given the precepts then. In the memorial services, you're actually, from somebody that's deceased, you're actually speaking directly to that person. It's very, very moving. So where did all this altruistic bodhisattva-ness arise from? Well, of course, most of us would think it's the Buddha's vow to teach. You know, he had his tremendous awakening, blissed out. I hear different stories. Roshi Okumura said it was 2 weeks. Thich Nhat Hanh says it was longer. Regardless, he came to the point where he said, this isn't just for me. I vow to teach others. But it actually, in Buddhism, it goes back further than that. And I want to share the story that Roshi Okumura recalled in his book, Living by Vow. And it actually comes out of the Pali Canon. So this is way before the Mahayana movement, if you will. And it is in the Khuddaka Nikaya of the Pali Canon. So part of this Nikaya includes the Jatakas, which are approximately 347 tales of Shakyamuni Buddha's previous lives. So this goes back, kalpas, long, long time beforehand. There were other Buddhas before the Buddha of our age, Siddhartha Gautama Buddha. And this is the story of Sumedha. He's a Brahmin, a very outstanding person, and comes from a very, very wealthy family. And the parents die when he's young. And a minister of the state, who was kind of the steward of the property, the family's property, he shows them all this wealth that has been brought from 7 generations. So the family treasury was filled with gold and silver, gems and pearls and other valuables. Well, he looks at all this and he said, so after amassing all this wealth, my parents weren't able to take a dime of it with them when they passed. Can it be right that I should seek to have my wealth with me when I go? Then he told the king that he would give all of his wealth to the poor and leave home and become a spiritual practitioner, which is what he does. So he runs off to the Himalayas, the story goes, and becomes kind of a hermit. And as often I am told that these yogi hermits, they get these superhuman knowledge and supernatural powers. So at the same time, while he's practicing, there is a previous Buddha called Dipamkara Buddha. So he appears in the world and starts teaching, just like Gautama taught in our age. And so it turns out he's going to visit a city close by where Sumedha is living. And so he gets pretty excited by this. He goes into the village, and the people, of course, are very excited, and they're trying to prepare everything to get ready for Dipamkara Buddha. Well, the road's kind of muddy, and they ask him, knowing that he's got all these supernatural powers, they ask Sumedha, so can you kind of put some new dirt in here and let's clean this up? And he said, well, yeah, but I'm not going to use my supernatural powers. I'm just going to use my hands, get my hands dirty, and start doing it. So he's doing this. Well, lo and behold, Dipamkara appears before this is done. So he arrives, and Sumedha realizes that the job's not done and that this Buddha needs to walk across the path. So he lies on the ground, full prostration, and tells him, walk over me. So he does this, most of us are familiar with some of the Tibetan traditions where they do their prostrations. It's a full prostration as well, right? And they do these circumambulating mountains and whatnot. And then in our Soto Zen tradition, we place 5 parts of our bodies, both knees, the elbows, and forehead on the ground. And then we place our hands, our palms, at the level of our ears, as if to accept the Buddha's feet on our hands. And this is the form we use to express our respect and gratitude for the Buddha. So there is Sumedha lying in the muck and the mire. He looks up at Dipamkara and makes a vow. And he said, if I want, I could now enter the Buddhist Sangha and by practicing meditation free myself from deluded human desires and become an arhat. Then at death I would be at once able to obtain nirvana and cease to be reborn. But this would be a selfish course to pursue. for thus I should benefit myself only. I want to help all beings as Dipamkara Buddha is doing now. And I vow to attain what Dipamkara Buddha attained and benefit all beings. So he made this bodhisattva vow. Reminds me of the lotus in muddy water. So the Buddha, seeing him lying in the mud, understood that he had made this vow as a bodhisattva. And he says, this is the Buddha says, Sumedha will become a Buddha named Gautama in the future. So this is an early example of the path we call the Bodhisattva practice, which is chosen by Shakyamuni Buddha. So our hero, Sumedha, realizes that to become a Buddha, he should practice the 10 paramitas, and he does that. And then I won't go into that today. We've got 10 paramitas in one tradition, 6 in another, and it gets complicated. So there you have it. The Bodhisattva spirit has been alive for kalpas. We come by it honestly. Now in Roshi Okumura's book, Living by Vow, he believes that all of our Zen chants and texts are based on the Mahayana teachings stemming from the Bodhisattva vow. So this includes, of course, the 4 Bodhisattva vows, the Gatha of Atonement that we do every morning, the 3 refuges, the verse of the Kesa, the meal Gatha, the Heart Sutra, which we chanted this morning, the identity of relative and absolute, the Sandakai, which we chanted this morning, the Gatha on opening the Sutra, which we just chanted. So why do we take on these impossible vows? Serving all beings? Vowing to save them? Extinguishing all of our human passions? Dharmas? In the old days, I remember in Zen, there weren't that many books. It felt like maybe that was doable to vow to master them. But boy, not nowadays. And I'm looking at that Pali Canon. And obtaining the Buddha way. So this is it's a serious question. You know, most of us would like to take vows on that we could complete. So we have that feeling of accomplishment. Well done. Be able to cross it off our to-do list. But an impossible vow. And it's interesting and actually comforting to know that these vows can go on for lifetimes and be picked up by others. Roshi Chozen gave an example of a university, the oldest continuously operating university, the university, and I'm going to butcher this, Al-Qarawiyyin in Morocco. You heard of that? Al-Qarawiyyin. Founded in 859 by a woman, Fatima al-Fihri. She took her inheritance and used it for this charitable purpose. And it's 1,000 years old. It's carried on for 1,000 years. Roshi Chozenbei talks about one of her teachers said, build this monastery and it will last 1,000 years. Great Vow Monastery. So that's one of her vows, to keep this going with the hope that this goes on for 1,000 years. Maizumi Roshi was asked one time about, like rebirth, reincarnation, and all that, and asks, what lives on? And Maezumi Roshi said, the vow lives on. And look at what he did, bringing Zen Buddhism from Japan into the West. Suzuki Roshi, San Francisco, same thing. And Maezumi Roshi's vow continues on with something like 214 teachers and thousands of students worldwide. And think about Dogen before him. Think about Buddha before him. The vow continues on. And here we are, continuing with this vow, carrying this vow forward. I think it's amazing. So I will end, like I love to do, with another poem. And this comes from Shantideva, who was a Buddhist mystic of the 8th century in India. And many of you will remember we looked at Shantideva's work, The Way of the Bodhisattva, for over a year. I did it here with our group, and we did it at the California Men's Colony, where it likewise took a year. We read every single line in it, and the commentary was Pema Chodron that we read, and we read every line of her commentary as well. And that's supposedly the way you're supposed to do it, because that way the birds and the insects, and at CMC the guards, can hear the Dharma. It's quite powerful. Shantideva wrote, "May I become doctor and medicine. May I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. And during the ages of scarcity, may I change into food and drink. May I become an inexhaustible treasure for those who are poor and destitute. May I be a protector of those without much, a guide for all travelers on the way. May I be a bridge, a boat, and a ship for all who wish to cross the water, a bed for those who wish to rest, and a servant to those in need."